Hello and welcome to episode 6 of ACM's Vault of Cults Season 2. The first 5 episodes have gone down quite well. I think I've been getting quite good feedback from some of you, mainly in person if I'm honest, but do get on the social medias. We have Facebook and Instagram, and you can comment on some of the places that you can stream it, I think. The last episode, The Last Starfighter, was a hell of a lot of fun, and nice to have Dave on the show who hasn't been on before. We've got a double episode for you this time. 2 of my favourite films as a youth, really, probably as a teenager. The first one, The Legend of Billie Jean from 1985. I'd have been 4 when that was released, and I probably watched that a few years later. Starring Helen Slater and Christian Slater, no relation. And Freaked from the mid-90s, an Alex Winter sort of horror comedy, mainly a comedy. The guy from the Bill and Ted movies sort of branched out solo, co-wrote a film that really bombed, but I love both of these films. Didn't do very well, but have become kind of not cult classics, but have become cult movies that a lot of us remember fondly. With both of these movies, as ever, I've found people who haven't seen them before to show them now, and to get their feedback on each movie, and both went down quite well, I think. Have a listen. Both do contain spoilers. I recommend you watch these films anyway, to be honest, but probably best you do watch them before, but they're quite hard to get hold of, so they're not major spoilers. So maybe Google the films first, and then if you can't get hold of them, listen anyway, and then try your very hardest. So that's one thing I do this to, sort of encourage people to watch these old films, and I know they're quite difficult to get hold of. I think definitely The Legend of Billie Jean has a UK and US DVD release, and I think a Blu-ray release. Freaked, I have got a DVD copy of, so you can probably pick up second-hand copies at various places, and there's usually legal streaming sites to find these things on as well. So the first one is with regular James Rowe, who you'll know from previous episodes and King Street Cinema in Ipswich. And the second with Andrew Stretton from the Pookaji Players, who is probably the guy who's been guest on this show the most over the past. It's been about 2 years now. Anyway, hope you enjoy. Hello, James. Thanks for joining us again.
Hello, Andy. Nice to be back.
We've just watched The Legend of Billie Jean.
Indeed. Yes.
A movie that you said when I asked you about it, you hadn't seen it, but one you've wanted to.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I thought it was one of them films where I've seen the poster or the video, in the shop when I was a kid, and I thought I might have even seen it, but I hadn't, and I thought it was something completely different to what it turned out to be. So.
Okay, what were your expectations going in, and what did you think it would be?
I thought it was going to be a sort of action sports movie.
Okay.
Right, where it was going to be sort of extreme sports like either snowboarding or skateboarding or something along those lines, just because of the front cover just has that sort of attitude of just do something a bit extreme.
Well, yeah, she's wearing sort of a wetsuit.
It's sort of a wetsuit and wearing this kind of, I don't know, glove that looks like she's tough.
Yeah,
and stuff. And
one earring, short hair.
The one earring, short hair, sort of punk, but also sporty. Was kind of the feel had of it. And there were a lot of those kind of movies out around the time, so that's what I thought it was.
Yeah, and had you got confused? I thought you said with Christian Slater was in a rollerblading movie around the same time.
He's in a skateboarding film again. I can't remember, which again is it's not a skateboarding film as in just, it's just kids skateboarding. It's skateboarding like thriller, something, there's murder and there's stuff in it.
I can picture the cover of that with long jackets on.
Yeah. And, I can't remember the name of it. So I thought it was that. Yeah. But it wasn't. So,
yeah. So should we briefly go over the basis of the plot?
Yeah.
It's quite simple, really. A group of kids basically... a moped stolen. They tried to get the money or it fixed or whatever from the thief's dad.
That's right.
Who runs a shop, and then it all goes wrong, and they're basically framed for robbery. of the shop and then go on the run, and then the media get involved, the police are after him. That's why it's the Legend of Billie Jean, because she and her little gang become outlaws.
Yeah, sort of folk heroes for local teen. Oh no, international or maybe just nationally become like, she's known all over the country anyway by the end of the film.
Yeah,
as being this kind of this Joan of Arc kind of character, which is brought up in the film,
referenced a few times
in the film. Yeah.
So it was made in 1985, and I don't think you even need to look that up. You can tell by watching it, it's the mid-80s, I'd say. Didn't do that well on release. It made about 3 million, I think.
Wow.
I couldn't find the budget, but I'm pretty sure I'd read the budget was something like 1.8 million. So it was a low-budget film, but but on I'll mention the commentary a few times on the DVD, which I listened to last night. It didn't get a very big release at all. They were saying it was like by the time it was on it did make the cinema, but didn't last very long. But then done well on sort of late night cable in America and video. I'd have first seen it, I think it was on sort of late night ITV, and I recorded it.
Right.
And then watched it, and it was on TV a lot when I was young, but because of certain themes, it was always on late night. But then I can remember things like The Breakfast Club always being on late night, because that wasn't shown.
Sure.
So it was one I'd seen, and I imagine, if I'm honest, I watched it because Helen Slater and Christian Slater are in it. Two big 80s icons, really. And they keep stressing, if you look at any interview about this film, they're not real brother and sister. They just share surnames. And
that's true.
It's very, and then they weren't married because Christian Slater was only 15 in this.
Yeah,
so I think it was his first major film. He'd been in TV movies, and I think things like Amazing Stories, the Steven Spielberg thing he was in. No, Tales from the Dark Side.
Tales of the Dark Side.
Yeah, which he later came back for the film of that, didn't he?
He was in the movie, yes, which I quite enjoyed actually.
Yeah. So the cast. Should we talk about the cast first, because it's a really interesting cast.
Yeah.
Well, briefly, the director first, actually, Matthew Robbins, who more known for screenwriting. But he directed a film called Dragon Slayer in 1980.
Yeah, I love Dragon Slayer. Fantastic.
Never seen that.
You've got to see Dragon Slayer. Anyone who has not seen Dragon Slayer should definitely see that. I highly recommend it.
Yeah. And in 91, he done the dog-based film Bingo, which I remember seeing the cover of everywhere when it came out, but never saw. But probably most well known for Batteries Not Included in 1987, which is a film I really like.
Yeah, I remember watching it a lot as a kid. Yeah, got a lot of nostalgic, happy memories of it.
Yeah, it was one of those very Spielberg, I'm sure.
He was the producer of it.
Because that was one as well that I always thought was a big hit, but wasn't. But a great film. He hasn't actually directed that much.
No, mainly a writer. Yeah,
and we'll talk about the writing later, because he didn't write this.
No.
But the cast is Billie Jean is played by Helen Slater, who was only 20 at the time. It was the first film she'd done after Supergirl.
Yeah, that was her first film.
Yeah, her first film. And there's a film that is remembered quite fondly. One I'm trying to do a podcast of. I've given a copy of it to someone to watch.
Another great film.
And that's one I really want to do. I was going to tie it in with this, but I thought we'll do this one.
Right.
And this was being made while that film was released, because the cast went to watch it in the cinema while they were filming this. So she was sort of set to become a big star, really. And then this didn't do so well. I think afterwards she was in Ruthless People, another film I really like.
Yeah, with Danny DeVito and Bette Midler and
Judge Reinhold. Yeah,
whatever happened to him?
Yeah, that's another great film. I met him at Comic-Con a few years ago.
There we go. That's what happened to him.
Yeah, he was a bit grumpy. And then afterwards, Secret My Success, which was a biggish hit. Yeah. And then she sort of went to more TV work. TV movies. And I vaguely... She did City Slickers in the 90s, but not a very big role.
That's tiny role. She's now reserved to just playing the mum who you see briefly at the beginning and then you never see again.
Exactly.
Sort of
And she came back to play Supergirl's Earth mum in the TV series.
I heard about that.
Supergirl.
Yeah,
so I think that's a role that she sort of distanced herself from, but now is embracing it again. I think that's kind of what happened. So she's the lead. We've got mentioned Christian Slater.
Yeah,
that was his first film. He's 15 years old. Mm-hmm. His mother was a casting director. So that's right.
I think both of his parents were involved to a certain degree in the business. Still probably are. But yes, his mum was a casting director, which might have helped.
Yeah, but you know, for a Jack Nicholson clone, he's a bloody good one. And you don't see that in this.
This is it was a point I was going to make. It's really nice to see Christian Slater not being Jack Nicholson.
Yeah,
you know,
and
nice.
I thought he was
really
good.
good.
And it was 3 years before Heathers, which was his sort of big...
That's the one.
And I can't believe he was only 18 when he made that.
Yeah.
I always think of these teen films as the teenagers all being about 30.
Yeah, because they later on a lot of them were in these movies. But
Martha Gurman, who played the other friend in it, who doesn't do much. She was 29.
Ophelia plays the character of Ophelia, who drives the car.
Yeah, that's pretty much what she does.
She's a getaway driver.
Yeah, well, I didn't recognise her. I've looked her up, and she was like a florist in Father of the Bride, and she was in Practical Magic.
Yeah.
So, an actress, but not really. But that's sort of very forgettable in this. Maybe because the other characters stand out. Who, the one you was going to mention, who is most well known for being Bart Simpson.
No, Lisa Simpson.
Lisa Simpson, of course.
Yardley Smith is Lisa Simpson, yes.
Yeah.
Can definitely recognise the voice.
Because Bart is...
Nancy Cartwright, I think.
She's
right?
in loads. Yeah, Nancy Cartwright. Yeah.
And she was the one. She's the one who's in the Twilight Zone movie, not Yardley Smith.
Yeah. I do get the two confused.
Yeah, me too.
I'd written on my notes Lisa Simpson, but still said Bart.
But, yeah.
But yeah, she's really good. And she was 20 playing a 14-year-old. And still gets angry because people seem to think she was a child actress, but she wasn't. This was her second film, but first sort of major role again.
Yeah, that's certainly the earliest thing I'd seen her in. So.
Yeah. Whoa. So I'm dropping my notes. But we'll talk about her in a minute. Just go over the rest of the cast. Keith Gordon, who just year after Christine.
Yeah. I remember Christine fairly fondly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a good. Was it? It's Stephen King. Horror, but directed by
John Carpenter. And for that reason, it's a good film. But for that reason, it should be a great film.
Yeah.
A lot of people love it. But he was the lead in that, wasn't he? And this is a year later.
Was the lead in that. Yeah.
And he's been in a lot of things. But now directing. Does a lot of TV stuff.
Yeah, TV director. Yeah.
Yeah. He did do the film, which I remember. I don't really know why, called The Chocolate War in 1988. I remember that.
I don't know that one.
Sort of a drama. I think I remember it because my brother had it on video. That's why I remember it. And then he's done stuff like Better Call Saul and things like that. He's doing now.
Right. Yeah.
So still really in the industry.
Yeah.
Richard Bradford is the sort of sleazebag villain guy.
He is the bad guy of the movie. Yeah.
A very interesting bad guy as well. Should we focus on that now? Should we talk about that character?
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's the father of the lad who steals the moped.
Yes.
Who basically propositions, or is this worse than that, isn't it?
Right. Well, this is an attempted rape.
Yeah.
Without question. Is not referenced too much in the film after the fact. In fact, only brought up again in suggestion, really, at the end of the film.
When they have their confrontation.
Yeah. But yes, it's very. I thought difficult to watch. I was like, really, this is in the film? Okay.
Yeah, it definitely stands out as being a different tone to the rest of the film.
But it's completely clouded by what happens next, which is amazing, because if it was made today, that just wouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
But in the 80s, I suppose that sort of thing was, a little bit more accepted on screen to be something that you wouldn't continue on.
Yeah.
You just say, okay, this really horrific thing has just happened, but let's move on because there's other stuff.
And that's about to happen, because it's like come up says, well, you can tell by the way the Billie Jean's reacting, she's expecting it to happen as well. I don't know if you picked up on that. She's very weary.
Sure.
So it's almost like this is a common thing.
Yeah, probably not to the extent that it got to, but the idea that someone might try to, because she's seen, it's very important, brought up. Yeah, the son of this man, his name's Pyatt, I think, in the film. His son Hubie is sort of trying to go. It's sort of mentioned he's trying to get a relationship going with her, wanting to go out with her.
Yeah.
But he's just a dick, and just an awful, typical 80s bully type character. So it's established that she's seen, and many as a beautiful young woman, and the lieutenant of the police also mentions it, that she's beautiful. It's clearly meant to be established that we recognise that every man is looking at her in a way that suggests, wow, she's gorgeous, she's lovely.
She's meant to be, what, 16, 17?
Something like that, yeah. So, yeah, the idea is that, you should be careful, lady, because men want to grab you because you look lovely, and who could blame them, sort of attitude. That's the attitude that's sort of given off.
And later on in the film, they go to sort of rescue this abused boy.
That's right.
And the last scene you see with the dad is he says to her, "Do you want to go out back?"
Yeah.
And then it cuts, and they've got the kid and gone out.
Yeah.
So that's obviously suggesting that he wants to do the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's, I mean, I think this film was made, and then it's been chopped apart to become the PG-13 that it was in America. It's a 15 over here, so it should be.
I was interested to talk about the chopping because the editing of the film is really poor, and I don't know what the reason of that is. If it was just they didn't, rushed for a reason, or if it was a rushed sort of thing, or for whatever. But there's lots of bits in the film where the transition to another scene seems really jarring, oh, that's quick, that seems a bit forced.
It's quite it's 96 minutes, and I get the feeling this was supposed to be sort of a 2-hour
movie.
But going back to the villain character, it's not one of these kind of, in this era you had the villains, but they were quite funny with it and stuff. He's just nasty. He's
nasty,
and then later on this couldn't be set over a very long period of time, and he's making T-shirts and frisbees and stuff with her on to cash in on this fame, which I think is sort of meant to be a bit more light-hearted, but it does show what a sleazebag he is.
Indeed.
He's cashed, and I think that's a very 80s thing, like get merch out.
Absolutely. Well, it's profiteering on a thing, and it's very much, like you say, it has completely the 80s feel of, oh, look at the big horrible fat cat just making money off any situation they can, kind of thing, whilst at the same time having loads of product placement, which the film is loaded with. So it's a real sort of paradox, because in one way it's saying capitalism good, in another way it's saying capitalism bad. There's a way you're supposed to do it,
well, it's a big studio film as well, isn't it? It's TriStar or something, so I think that that's what the writers would have put in, not really, and the film company wouldn't have realised.
Exactly.
That was but that's also a very 80s thing. So he was good, but it was almost like he's in the wrong movie, because he's got this light-hearted Pat Benatar soundtrack, and and it's meant to be this feel-good film.
Is that what you think? Is that like your?
I think it's
overall thing. I really didn't get that from it.
It starts like that, and then the way it ends is like, I think it's more not meant to be, but sold as this feel-good film.
Maybe,
and I think a lot of that is the music.
Oh, certainly. Certainly with the music. I mean, there are parts of it which to me just felt really out of place. Like, I'm not quite sure if I'm watching another film, There
was a dance scene cut out where they go into like this rave club place, and there was an actual dance scene filmed.
Oh, really?
So I think it was more, I don't know, I think my theory on this film is they'd written a serious teen drama, and then it got 80'd up, and they wanted to sell it. So,
that's interesting. And that's probably right.
And another thing of which is mentioned in the commentary again, the front cover is Billie Jean with her hair cut all short, but that's like an hour through. It's like the changing point in the film. The cover's almost a spoiler. And is she cutting her hair right short because she's getting all this malattention? Is it saying boy up? That's a statement, isn't it?
It's true. I agree with you, because the reasoning behind it, sort of that's given in the film, what's actually like the reading of the film, what's going on, is that she's just learnt about Joan of Arc, right? Joan of Arc had short hair, right? And that's kind of all we get about why she's now deciding to cut her hair. We're not really given any information of like, okay, I need to change, myself for what reason, what purpose? We're not really learning anything there.
No, I mean, I always got it was just her statement, going back to the rape bit.
Yeah, maybe being sort of...
But there's quite a nice bit at the end where, she's got all her followers and they cut their hair, and at the end, in the fire, they throw away the merchandise to say we don't need to follow someone like that. So it's trying to put this message out there.
Also, though, that we're not going to, that we're not going to give money. We're going to stop, giving money to this guy. We hate you now because we just learned. Remember, they've all learnt, that he's done a awful thing.
Yeah.
But
it's, the cop character is quite interesting. That's another well-known actor. I can't think who played the cop. Peter.
Peter Coyote.
He's been in loads. He's in E.T.
He's in E.T. Yeah.
But he plays the cop who I can't make out whose side he's on. So I'm sure he takes a bribe from they're talking about the villain guy bribing him at the beginning, and he's just sort of there as a cop. He's a great actor.
Yeah,
but he's just like
he's written awfully. He's written awfully. Like there's constantly laws being broken right in front of his face, and him doing nothing about it. Just let's carry on with the plot, which is let's chase these kids.
Because I think it's not emphasised enough, but it is supposed to be he's a corrupt cop who comes round.
Well, that's really not. That's not shown anywhere near as much as it should.
Yeah, but it's suggested definitely. Because, like you say, things are going on. He just turns a blind eye. It's almost like he's scared of the villain, but it's not properly addressed.
I suppose we could mention like where it's set. I suppose in terms of that, because that might have element to do with it. It's set in southern Texas, in seemingly quite a small place.
Yeah,
and we've got a very well established class thing going on between the kids who are living in the trailer, who are Billie Jean and her friends, and then Hubie and this guy, his father, who have their own store and obviously have the money. They are the people with the money, and so there's obviously a very important, plot device going on there where we go, right, here we are very well established two sets of classes here. We have the police, then who are they going to side with,
Yeah.
And where is their bread being buttered kind of thing, right? So maybe we're getting paid off, like you say. Maybe there are bribes being, other in the sort of the universe that they're living in, where they just get away with stuff because they can just buy people off, like the police.
Yeah.
And
but it's another thing that's sort of weird about this film is the amount of for these kids, the amount of police they send after them and stuff. It's really OTT, isn't it?
Everything about it's over the top.
Yeah.
All of the elements to it are just ramped up a little too high early on, and then from there you just have to keep going and going and going higher and higher and higher.
That's, to be honest, that's one of the things I like about it, because it is ridiculous, and it's a hell of a lot of fuss over a moped, is how I see this film.
Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately that's it. I mean, the kid got his moped beaten up. I mean, granted, it's a lovely Honda Elite, so it's completely 80s, like the most 80s moped you ever see, because ultimately it is just a moped, but it looks like this futuristic, flashy Transformer type vehicle.
And at the end, there's a massive, sort of, I don't know, paper mache.
Well, it's the effigy. It's the effigy of Billie Jean being burned to the stake instead of her, Joan of Arc.
Exactly, but the fact that they've created this in that short time.
Oh yeah,
it's just it must be set over 3 days or something, which I think is great.
Well, maybe not. It's got that sort of feel that. There's a lot of travelling going on. It's kind of a road movie in a way. There's lots of on the road in a car going around. So maybe there's a lot of passage of time.
It certainly doesn't feel like that. It is. Though.
No, not at all. It's a weekend.
I really like the Keith Gordon character as well, because it's like 80s rich kid.
Yeah,
with
completely.
All the horror masks and.
Do you know, I did sigh. I did sigh when I saw that. I was like, oh, really? Okay. Yeah, okay, I got it.
And he seems to just live in a mansion by himself.
Yeah, well, he's Dean Stockwell's character's son. And Dean Stockwell is the district attorney, which is a very powerful position in America to be, sort of like the lawyer of the state kind of thing. You know, so
But Dean Stockwell, I really feel he's underused. But it might be because he was doing a lot of roles like this at the time. But it might be because it's not long. Well, about 5 years before Quantum Leap, which is what I recognise him from other stuff. Obviously, I'm looking at the DVD over there now of Blue Velvet. He was. Which would have been just after this. Blue Velvet was,
after, yeah.
So I think this was sort of just before. It's not really a comeback, but it's sort of his.
I see. I know him from a film previous year to this one, so in '84, which is Paris, Texas, which is one of my favourite films ever. Yeah. And he plays a supporting role in that with Harry Dean Stanton, who plays the lead in it. And he's brilliant in it. It's absolutely fantastic. It's one of my favourite movies, and he's great. But yeah, I'm pretty sure the first time I ever saw him would have been Quantum Leap.
But it was that sort of, because he was about in the 70s. He was in things like Columbo and that, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Everyone was in.
But
Columbo.
he was. Like I say, he was a kid.
Yeah.
He was.
Wasn't he in Lassie or something like that?
Yeah.
So that's another Lassie connection then with Helen Slater and. But I feel that it's got a good cast, and I think he was, working actor. This is a job.
Yeah.
So therefore he rocks up, does his job, and leaves. Mm-hmm. Whereas in other films he really stands out. I mean, he kind of does the same in June, doesn't he?
It's true. Yeah, which again was just before this as well.
Yeah. So he's just but I think as well he's overshadowed by some of the other actors. But it is one of those films. It's almost like John Hughes. The parents are just 2D in the background.
Right. You are right. They are. But there is a really important part, I think, that should be mentioned about. Again, we are being shown that all adults in the film are pretty much bad people, right? Are either abusers or neglectors, which is another form of abuse.
Her parents aren't, though, are they?
We don't see them at all. Oh no, her mother is the only person that's good, which is why they're probably a little bit more sort of clued in. The Yardley Smith character, who's Lisa Simpson, her name is in the film is Putter, which is a very odd name. Her mother is physically abusive to her.
Yeah,
knocks her about, smacks her.
Yeah, you hear her right at the beginning. Yeah. You actually see her slap her across the face when they.
Which is when she has her changing moment when she starts to cut her hair as well.
When the actress actually did hit her in that scene. As
right.
Well.
I remember watching it, going, "Whoa, that was that looked good. That looked real."
Yeah, that was. One of those that apparently it was a misunderstanding, but it's the sort of thing that I imagine the director will be like, just do it.
Definitely, without a doubt.
This was 1984, wasn't it? They filmed this, so it would have been. It is very. Things like that are kind of worrying because it just shows all adults to be arseholes.
That's the idea. I think that's sadly kind of the point.
But I think that's kind of it's meant to be innocent because that's how. It sells the film to kids.
Exactly, to teenagers, because teenagers hate authority and they hate their parents and they hate the teachers and all the rest of it.
You look at the Breakfast Club, there's not many adults in it. You see a couple of the parents in the cars, don't you, at the beginning, the headmaster. There's the janitor who's the only redeeming.
Yeah.
But then it's almost like that's what the kids would see as the lowest form of adult.
Yeah.
Just,
he's got to be in the school too, and all the teachers don't either ignore him or generally
he's
mean to him.
He's like a bigger kid.
Pretty much, yeah.
But I can see why they do it to sell the film, but just stepping back, it's not that healthy, is it?
It's awful. No, it's really bad. I mean, I was watching it like, wow, like me watching it for the first time in my life as an adult, and just thinking this is really, really poor, as in like social commentary. Because you've got some really serious points here that you can make really well, and you're choosing not to. Just making it light-hearted and fun.
I mean, her mum stands out as being the likeable, nice. And what I thought about that is you looked at that actress. I'm not sure who it was, but you could see that could be both of their mums. I think that was really good casting. But then it is another where when you look at the adults, it's like. Think Stockwell's character, there's no sort of good or bad there, really. He's just there. And then you've only got sort of 3 other characters, and they're all really nasty.
Yeah.
But the cop... The cop... like I say, it's not... It's one that... When I watched this as a kid, I watched it as a kid. And the younger characters in it were older than me when I watched it. And I think that's one of the reasons they wanted this as a PG-13. To sell it, possibly... to the slightly older people who'd have seen Supergirl, and then this is the next stage they'll be like, oh, that's her. So that might be a reason why it was edited. She might have been cast or whatever, and then Supergirl came out. I know it didn't do very well, but it was a big film, so they wanted to sell this to a younger audience off the back of that.
You may be right with that. I mean, I'm pretty sure if that isn't completely correct, there certainly would have been executives saying things along those lines. Definitely, yeah. So
just while we were talking about the cast, Caroline Williams has a cameo. Do you know Caroline Williams? Have you seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2? The DJ.
I have, yes, DJ. Yes,
yeah, she's
yes, she is in the car.
Yeah.
Right, I want to talk about that bit as well, because that is unbelievable. That's
mental, isn't it?
It's one of, but it does have the finale of that sequence is great, because it's actually my favourite part of the whole film, which is where Yardley Smith has her period, and they make a sort of, there's a joke of it being made, but I thought it was actually quite sweet. Quite nice, which is why I think her character and Yardley Smith in it is my favourite person in the film. But yeah, before that, they're getting shot at.
Yeah.
Because there's a $10,000 bounty on
Billie Jean's head. They're like, we're being shot at. I don't know. There's something like that is said, isn't it?
Yeah. But and there's kids in the street, like all these kids are there because they've come to see Billie Jean off, because it's just after they'd rescued that child from his abusive father. And they're all like cowering because there's this guy just shooting his rifle from his car. Yeah. It is in the middle of a street in a residential area.
Yeah.
And again, no cops. You know, as far as like where's the authorities? Like, they're apparently being chasing after Billie Jean, but they're not here. Well, he's shooting his gun off. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Just absolutely like insane. So yeah, they get bullets through the window. And when you're thinking of a film that is for young people, or generally that kind of danger, that kind of peril, is a little heavy.
I think that was add an action scene in.
Well, you could have action without guns being shot at supposed teenagers.
Yeah, but that's what kids like. Isn't it? This is what it's.
I mean, again, would definitely not be done today.
Yeah.
With America, with all its, gun problems and politics and everything about it. There's just no way. Amazing time, the 80s.
Yeah. But I mean, the big theme in the film is, sort of good morals and stuff. I mean, the tagline "Fair is fair," which is what the film was originally going to be called.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally think they changed the name to make money off the Michael Jackson song.
Yeah.
Which they sort of mention a bit in sort of the behind the scenes stuff. It's got to be in it. And then another reason why people went there, I think people didn't know what this film was. It wasn't sold well. But the themes of don't break the law, because they and then when they do take stuff, they write IOUs.
That's right.
Things like that. Sort of nice. That's very
so there's no stealing. This attitude of, and then they don't want to hurt. They don't want to hurt anybody.
No.
I mean, of course, right. We hadn't mentioned that, which is an important part of the plot, that Christian Slater's character had accidentally shot the villain of the piece. Obviously, not killed him, but shot him in the arm.
Yeah.
And that's really that's the moment that starts off we got to run, we got to go, sort of thing, and then is brought up with the whole sort of stealing, which they didn't do, stealing money from the shop and all that.
Yeah, and then there's nice little touches like did you burn that school down? So it's the myth what comes.
Yeah, this is folklore, isn't it? So we get this sort of stories being told and about someone, about what they've been up to, what they've been doing, and
it's a strange one, because the reason it stands out to me, one of the reasons I think I like it so much, is there was so many 80s teen films. That was the heyday, the golden era of teen movies, in my opinion, in the 80s. And this one is different. There's a lot.
Now, I agree with you. It is different. It is different as far as like mainstream, like films that were absolutely. It's not like we got one here. Fast Times at Richmond High, which is really like the beginning of those sort of 80s teen movies, and it's nothing like that.
No. It is more John Hughes.
Yeah, certainly.
But I think it's made as a cash-in on these films. But it's almost like I said before, I think there was a script going around, and then they really developed into being something that they thought would sell more.
Yeah.
So there was probably it could have been a TV movie drama, a lot more serious, gritty.
Yeah.
And then they just wanted to. It's almost like they've put glitter on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's got all those elements. As I was saying, like, you're absolutely right. It's got all of those sort of pieces that, at that time and in the 70s as well, on TV dramas, sort of TV movies made for TV that were about social issues to do with children sort of falling apart or falling through the cracks and things like that. And it's got all those bits that you say, wow, this is going to be should be quite a heavy movie. It might be a bit cheesy, they generally are, but at least it'll be, done in earnest and taken seriously. But this is not that. This is a romp, a fun.
Well, words are, if you look at reviews, the word camp comes up a lot.
Yeah, completely.
Guilty pleasure comes up a lot. It's a phrase I hate because if something's cheesy, I can still like it.
Yeah, completely, of course.
But I can see why people would say that. I personally wouldn't, because you could say that about any film I do in this podcast.
Yeah, sure.
But I generally like them. If not, I wouldn't.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with cheesy, I don't know.
Yeah. But I do think this is one that, when I watched it as a kid, there was so much I didn't pick up on it. And that's possibly why I don't care so much now. Because for me, it is a film that was made in 1985. It's not talked about much now. The poster you still see quite a bit. It's that sort of kind of...
Yeah.
More people... Yeah. It's like more people have seen the Pat Benatar video to the song's Invincible than the film. People don't really know the film. And it's a strange one. That's one of the reasons I love doing this podcast is I generally think if you'd have watched this when you were 9 or 10, maybe a little bit older, but I'd have been about 10 when I was, I think, you'd have a completely different look on it than when you watch it now.
Without doubt, of course.
And it's really interesting. I enjoyed it. I watched it when the Blu-ray came out probably 10 years ago. I had to get an American copy, and I liked it. But I liked it more watching it now when I'm 40 now. And I totally, when I watched it 10 years ago, I think I expected to still love it. I still liked it, but it was just that film. But now I watched it even older. For me, it was so 80s. It was so.
It is,
and I loved the soundtrack more than I ever did.
I was going to say.
Pat Benatar in a live set will introduce this is from the worst movie ever made.
Oh, that's a bit unfortunate. For everyone concerned, it's certainly not the worst movie ever made.
She's very wrong. But I was surprised. I'd forgotten that Rebel Yell's in it, and that would have been around the same time that was released.
Absolutely. Well, I re-released, I think. I was looking up the soundtrack, and it said that had been Rebel Yell. I think it had been re-released and sort of became big in America, in American charts. It was very popular.
Because this is one. It's definitely a film that. There's iconic things like the poster you used to see everywhere.
Yeah, like I say,
and the Pat Benatar song. She's done it Invincible for it, but other songs are on the soundtrack. I think.
Yep, there's a few on there. I think,
and that was written and released for the film. But then it's like no one saw it, which is you never know with these things. But it is the poster stands out. It's that what is this? Especially then, female hero.
Oh yeah, completely. And that's another very important point, I think, in the lead being a woman, the character being who she is, the Joan of Arc, idea, everything in the 80s. Again, there's lots of stuff there that could really be touched on for feminism, things, and they're not really.
They're not there.
Yeah.
Do you think this is something that they could sort of do a reboot of now?
Yeah.
Because I think TV series.
Yeah, me too. I do too.
Yeah. So I think, and as 80s as it is, there's a lot of. I'd say it has dated in many ways we've discussed, but in many ways it hasn't dated.
It has, like I say, it's got really strong social issue points in there that are completely relevant today as they were then. And you could tell this story.
There's
again.
At the beginning, there's a homophobic slur, which stands out. But things like that, I think that shows the villain's a villain. The fact they say it,
absolutely. It's said by the villain. There's no sort of so-called good guys saying anything.
It's not Bill and Ted saying it.
yeah.
I love Bill and Ted, but you know what I mean. But that was, things changed.
Still laugh at that though.
I saw Bill and Ted in the cinema recently, and that got a massive laugh. And then everyone was like, "Oh,
brilliant!"
Yeah,
love it.
But yeah, I mean, so I always ask the question: has it dated? It has, but there's nothing in this I wouldn't show to a modern teenager.
No, of course not. No, I think there's nothing overall, like just as a very, in my opinion, superficial film. It's fine. There's nothing that you'd say, oh no, you shouldn't. I think teenagers today would probably appreciate it.
Yeah,
a lot. So
it's got the
for what it is.
The like montages of like them stealing from not stealing, but the IOUs.
And
sure. The bit in the mall's great, I think.
And
there's lots
apart from its ridiculousness, and everyone should have been arrested at that point.
But then the ridiculous end of like she's got this massive like curly wig on. Christian Slater dresses up as her.
That's
it's
interesting.
Great.
That's interesting. I was thinking about that. I was like, there's something here. I bet there's some subtext here. I'm not quite getting it.
But yeah, I don't know, things like that. I mean, I just think there are iconic scenes in this film for those who like it. It's sort of, I don't know, the bits stand out, but then it is the sort of film that. I mean, I watched Highlander the other night, and I watched that about every 5 or 6 years, and there's always massive chunks of it I just forget.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same with this film.
Can I mention about that, actually, about forgetting this film, or forgetting films in general? I told my boss, Dan, that I was, going to do this podcast. I'd never seen this film. He'd seen this film. He'd seen it in the 90s, so not when it came out.
Yeah.
Sort of, which he would have been, I don't know, in his, about 20 years old. I went over the plot with him, and he couldn't remember any of it at all. He couldn't remember any of these bits that I was saying. The only thing he can remember, which is why he said, and he was very honest about it, the only reason why I think I saw the film was because of Helen Slater. I just was in love with Helen Slater.
And that's why a lot of people watched it, I think. So it's
maybe too forgettable for a lot of people.
Yeah, or they went in expecting something else.
Yeah.
And they got...
Well, I think that's probably true.
Yeah.
Because I was very surprised by the film overall, as what the plot and everything was.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, this is not what I was expecting.
Yeah. Did you want to mention the writers?
Briefly, so we got, I think it's Mark Rosenthal, and they're a duo of writers. They written quite a few films together, some of which we've maybe mentioned on, you might have mentioned on your show before. So Mark Rosenthal and Lawrence Kerner, who were the writers for Superman 4: Quest for Peace.
Oh my God, yeah, that makes sense.
and also Star Trek 6: The Undiscovered Country, which I think is,
that's one
of the with Leonard Nimoy. So I don't know if Leonard Nimoy was maybe the more stronger of the writers.
Yeah,
on that one.
It might be that they got them to help him.
Yeah, help it. You just sort of like tighten it up a bit, tighten the script up a bit or whatever. But yeah, I quite like the Superman 4.
But didn't Superman 4 have like loads of writers?
No, I think it might have been just either them or...
I think Christopher Reeve was something to do with it.
Oh, probably, yeah.
But then writing's different to story, and it might have been that might have been another one.
But I think they were the main writer, and that was after this.
Yeah.
So I think this was their first film that they'd got made, that they'd written and had then eventually been made, because they'd done television, sort of like Cagney and Lacey, episodes of shows like that at the time.
So do you reckon they were cheap?
Probably.
But they done much after?
I think they were still working, certainly, but I hadn't really heard of too much else. And
it mentions in the commentary that... what was his name? Walter Bernstein was involved. He was a blacklisted.
Yes.
For all the McCarthy stuff.
Yeah, you'd mentioned this because I mean I didn't know that.
There's nothing online about that. That was what Helen Slater mentions it in the commentary.
Yeah.
Because it was mentioned at the time of filming. But he was writing films around the same time and has done since. So that's a strange one. It might be with that particular studio didn't want to be associated with him.
Maybe.
Or maybe she was confused and he did write something then it wasn't used. That could be you know, a lot of scripts go through lots of different.
I mean, I don't know much about his politics or anything, so I couldn't really say, you know, that what bits in the film are his.
Yeah.
But I very much took on the whole capitalism element of the film as being kind of important as a negative and something to, be wary of the evils of people that profiteer on other people's either misfortunes and things like that. And I really thought that, that was one of the strongest points of the film. That wasn't, hey, don't try to rape people, sort of thing. But so the villain's got a few elements to him that show his villainy, really, and that's one of them. And if he was sort of more associated with left-wing politics, maybe sort of like looked more towards communism, and that might have been why he was blacklisted. Well, I could kind of understand that from what goes on in the film. There's an element there that certainly is very much about that. So
that's interesting. But so I couldn't find anything online about that.
Yeah, it's bizarre that you can't find anything.
No, but he's on the commentary, and when I googled the name, I'm like, oh, he's written loads, and he only died like last year. He was 101.
Amazing.
So that's a weird one. But the just looking at the scores, I don't know what it's got on Letterboxd. I forgot to look, but it's got 50% on Rotten Tomatoes and 6.6 on IMDb.
Yeah, I saw that.
Which is kind of what I'd expect from it.
Most of the reviews that people have left on there are generally, even the negative ones, are pretty positive in the sense of being honest about what the film is. Like you got to just go with it, and not take it too seriously, because even though it does have serious issues, matters involved in the film, it's clearly not a film that wants you to take it too seriously.
Yeah.
So I think people generally have been quite fair with the film, really.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, I'm going to be quite fair.
Fair
with
is
the film.
fair, isn't it?
Fair is fair. Yeah.
But I think when it was released, from the little bits I've read, it didn't get damning reviews. It just got average, and that might be, you've got to look at what else came out. The same time, it could have been
Back to the Future.
Well, yeah, it's that time. You don't know what.
Cocoon.
Yeah, it's a good year for food, for films. Short Circuit, probably. So you've got to see what's released that. But sometimes I think a film what gets terrible reviews gets more noticed than a film with average reviews.
Absolutely.
So more people out of interest will go and see it.
Oh, completely.
So the average ones.
That's when people don't go see a film.
Yeah. Yeah. I always remember I always think of average films when it had a good director. I can't think who the director was, but when Billy Crystal and Robin Williams finally done a film together, the Father's Day. Oh yeah, and those two were mates. They worked well together, and they just released this most average of comedies.
Yeah, never saw it, but
and it was just like it was a straight 2.5 out of 5. Yeah. There's nothing bad about it, but there's nothing good about it. Yeah. And with those two, you expect. I think they just wanted to hang out.
Yeah, that's what the poster looked like.
So it's strange, but I just want to mention as well. Did you notice the wigs? There's loads of wigs in it. Yeah. Because of reshoots, they'd put a wig on her, and because obviously the big bit where she cuts her hair.
Yeah, sure.
And the
I mean, her hair. To me, I never thought her long hair was real. Like at any point.
Oh, it was
really.
at the beginning.
At the beginning, right? Yeah. But
I
was no.
And Yardley Smith gets her hair cut off right towards the end.
Yes.
Which you sort of see her about to do it, and it cuts off.
Yeah.
And not cuts off. The scene cuts off.
Scene cuts,
so she didn't cut her hair, and you see her about twice after, and she's got it tucked behind her shirt with a wig over the top. Because she refused to do it. She'd probably after the slap in the face, she was like, "I'm not doing anything else. You guys want."
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anything else you want to mention? Cast-wise, the plot's all right, and it's certainly one thing what I say about a bad film is boring. I don't think this film's boring at all.
No, I mean it does do a typical 80s thing, which gets a bit baggy in the middle, and you go, "Oh, come on, just get back to the set pieces where the action's happening." Yeah. But apart from that, no, it's not boring. It's fine. It's tight enough as a film. Cohesive enough and not you know, I could be about 10 minutes shorter for me, but
Yeah.
ultimately it's fine. The timing is fine, 95 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it did need that dance scene. That'd have been interesting.
Well, there's that bit where she goes down those stairs into that sort of looks like a weird sort of nightclub.
That's the bit.
Yeah,
That's the scene.
and then nothing happens.
Yeah,
and you go, what was that for?
Yeah, she's supposed to sort of interrupt the rave or something. And
Right.
just join in with them. And,
Right.
But I imagine that they probably filmed this outlandish dance scene which goes against the tone of the film.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so that's...
Yeah, it's got elements to it that are like, okay, this could at any point turn into a music video.
Yeah.
But and then never does.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, it's not it. Even though I did say it's tight, there are bits of it where you go, wow, that's what's the point of that?
Yeah,
it's almost like filler. You know, just like eating up time.
But the bits they do are still entertaining. That's the...
yeah. I mean,
I think the film looks good. You know, the editing, I agree, is like, what's that? But it's shot well, and
yeah,
it just looks.
Yeah,
I think it looks a higher budget film than it probably was as well.
Yeah, a little bit. I was surprised by hearing what you know, the number you said. What was that, 1.5 or something?
Oh, I'm sure, I can't find. I might be wrong. I'm sure it cost under 2 million to make and made 3 million.
Right.
But I might be wrong because it is sort of known as a flop.
Right.
But then it's still...
Well, I'm you know, I mean, I suppose it makes sense. I mean, about 2 million, a little bit under for the film. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm sure most of the people in it are, you know, who are on screen the most are young, wouldn't have cost much for them, and people like Dean Stockwell probably just, you know, didn't do it for too much either.
Well, no, imagine at that point for him and the guy who played the cop and the villain.
Yeah,
it's like their job. You know, 5 days a week, goes to work. Is just going on set doing a film.
Yeah,
because the amount of work they've done in that period.
Yeah,
is.
And I mean, there are some fairly big set pieces of like action, but nothing too extravagant.
No.
There's a bit. Is there a car? I can't remember. There's a car? Was the bit with the guy shooting his gun where they do some you know, some rolls and things, and that would have cost a bit to get that to do that. But I mean, overall, it wasn't like crazy big explosions or anything like that.
Yeah.
So
I think it was probably sort of made quite cheap because it was made as a money maker. So that's what most films are, especially through the Hollywood system.
Yes,
but what I like about it is it tries to say something and it means well. And
I do think it means well. I don't think it was made in any sort of mean-spirited way at all. I think that it was very much trying, or at least some people involved in the film was certainly wanting to say something important, and it got a little lost. But you know, overall, it's, you know, it's typical 80s fun, really, isn't it?
Yeah. So do you want to give it a rating out of 5?
3.
3. That's higher than I thought.
Yeah.
You said, yeah.
I mean, I teeter on 2 and 3, but when I'm, you know, I would say just about a 3, just because of the elements that are in there, like I've said, and overall the acting is fine. It's competent. Like you can just sit and watch it, and it's not like something you go, oh really, you know, this is awful. I do find some of the accents a little annoying because they're all doing Texan accents.
That's the thing they mentioned that
most of them are not from even the South.
Yeah, they say in the commentary they say they think they all overdo it.
Yeah,
but that's the direction, isn't it? They're told to.
Yeah.
Especially if you know the voices from other roles,
that's a little annoying. But apart from that, the acting's fine. Like everyone in it's fine.
Yeah, I think it's a year after Supergirl, and I like that film. I'll discuss that when I do a podcast. And I know you don't dislike it.
Supergirl, it's great, but again for nostalgic reasons more than anything else. But it does have a fantastic cast.
Yeah, but Helen Slater in that is kind of. There's not much of a character there.
No.
And so
it's not about her, really.
No, she's got the look of Supergirl. She does fine, but this is the next step where you know what, she can act. That's how I see this role.
Yeah.
And then if you watch her in Secret of My Success, it's another completely different. She's the businesswoman in that, and that's a world away from this character.
Yeah, sure.
I think she could have gone on to be a big star. But you mentioned your boss. was like a big fan as younger.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
she was a big name up till the early 90s, but because of stuff what had been repeated on TV.
But I think sadly, more to do with just the way she looked, more
Possibly,
than just than her as an actor. Because yes, I think a lot of people looked at her and thought, "Wow, which in the film is made point that she's a very attractive woman, and so therefore a lot of people are just men mainly, I suppose, are going to just flock to see her in a film, and especially in this film because there are parts where she wears very little. Early on in the film especially, which I almost was to say, oh, that looks a little bit exploitative, but I was like, okay, man, it's not.
Another thing they mentioned in the commentary, so did you feel exploited that? And she said at the time I did, but I'll never look like that again. So so she sort of laughed it off, but she was aware of that. Yeah,
because I mean, it's like I say, it's very clear. There's a shot where I'm like, wow, that went. And I know it's going to sound so tedious, but just even at half a second too long, I was like, that went on just a little too long. That was clearly there for the boys to go,
But those bits at the beginning, later on, he's selling posters of that same.
Yeah, that shot,
which is weird.
Yeah, well, this is it. I think this is why I think that maybe the heart of the film is in the right place, because it's saying, look at this awful person, making money off this shot which she didn't want taken. So because one of the bad guys, you never see him again. He's an interesting little character who has no name, who for some reason has a very flashy camera. Yeah. And it's just he's clearly into photography, but that's a really weird character a bully character who is really into photography.
Yeah, it just says pervert to me.
Oh, fair enough, yeah.
I mean, free rating, that's good. Personally, for me, I think on Letterboxd, it went from a 4 to 4.5 on another watch.
Okay.
But that's...
Well, I'm not surprised by that. I thought you'd give it a 4,
yeah. But we did... briefly touch on... We mentioned Bill and Ted, or I did.
Yes.
I recorded with Mr. Andrew Stratton podcast about the Alex Winter film Freaked.
Yes.
Which I think I'm going to put out with this. So we've got like nearly 2 hour and a half, 2 hour episode. But that's a film you'd already seen and really like it.
Oh, yeah, big fan.
So just your thoughts on Freaked, quickly.
One of the greatest movies of the 90s that very few people ever watched, that was made completely to have a good time with, right? It's not a serious movie. It's a complete just fun farce. Lots of silly jokes. And everyone in it is clearly having a bloody good time, and you should too when watching it, because, it's great. It's absolutely great. And it's got fantastic music in it as well.
It has, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And a great cast.
Amazing cast.
But thanks
Mr. T. A Peter Fool.
Yeah. A Peter Fool who don't watch Freaked. So he pities most people on the planet. But big thanks for talking about this. Hopefully get you back soon. Yeah. Keep listening, people. I'm going to go straight over to the conversation with Andrew Stratton about Freaked. You've got to take in context that we just recorded this, and I think I planned on doing a few Alex Winter films, but what it is I've got to get people to watch the films and have the time to record it. So if we do go off on one and imply we're going to talk about films what aren't The Legend of Billie Jean, just ignore that and enjoy it for what it is. And I recommend you watch both films. But anyway, this is... I'll put a little weird sort of bit of music in the middle, on the little filler bits.
Yeah.
And then I'll be back talking to Stratton. Thank you very much. Hello, Andrew. How you doing?
Hi, yeah, I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right. I've just watched Freaked.
Yeah, we have.
Thanks for joining me again. You missed the last maybe couple of these.
Yeah, it's good to keep some distance, I think, from me, isn't it?
It is indeed. But I think you're still you're our most returning guest.
You are better be.
You are the Steve Martin and Alec Baldwin of this podcast. That's a Saturday Night Live reference.
Yeah.
And I would say an Alex Winter fan, yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. What do you know of Alex Winter?
Not a lot, to be fair. It is mostly just Bill and Ted, I guess Lost Boys, and like some of his documentary stuff.
Yeah, so... But yeah. I think by sort of producing and stuff, that is really a bit of directing. That's what he's most well known for.
Yeah.
And we see him as well. It's iconic Bill and Ted, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which some people would say is a cult film, but both of those films were pretty big hits.
Yeah.
So that's not the sort of thing we'd cover on this podcast. Lost Boys, massive hit, but it has a huge following, but still puts into the cult thing. But I think this is the perfect one to do.
Yeah.
A film made in 1993 that really, really bombed. I mean, had you heard of the film before?
Yeah, but sort of not in any serious capacity, and hadn't given it much of a thought, to be honest. But yeah,
it's probably cool. I mean, you're a good 10 years younger than me, and probably wouldn't remember it coming out.
No.
Actually, it's probably what
you years before I was born.
Yeah, couple years. That might be right. But quite hard to get hold of now. I mean, we've just watched it on a DVD copy, which I don't know if there's a year of the DVD. Probably the original release of it. 15 certificate. No extras or anything. It has since in America had a double DVD release with Anchor Bay, and that was in 2005 or something. So the version we watched was probably the only UK release of it on DVD. I can remember it coming out to rent on video, but I don't think it came out to buy on video. And when I was a kid, I haven't really explained how I saw this, because it's how we sort of do it. Being a big fan of Bill and Ted, this film came out. Very small release, straight to rent on video in this country. And I can remember Alex Winter coming over and was on programmes like The Big Breakfast and things like that promoting it.
Wow.
And then it was having to track it down, and I rented it for my local rental. I initially rented it, and it's one of those I rented a few times, and it didn't come out to buy, and I'd done the very illegal thing of getting 2 video recorders with SCART leads and recording it from... That has since been destroyed, and you can't prove it. I could have just made that up. So that's how I had a copy of it, and how I managed to watch it quite a few times when I was younger.
You're going to go to prison now.
Probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's how I saw it. And I did like it, but it's one of those, I generally haven't watched it, I'd say at least a decade, if not more. Found the DVD, and still intact in its case, not been put into a folder like a lot of mine have been. And actually, really enjoyed watching it again.
Yeah.
So, should we just quickly run over the plot? It's mad, the plot.
Yeah.
It's, Alex Winter plays an actor who was a child actor, grown up, and he is on a chat show talking about... You see a silhouette of him, don't you?
Yeah.
Talking about how he's basically hinted that he's turned into a freak, and there's the story of he's working for a company basically to promote a product.
Yeah.
And it's...
kind of sketchy environmental impact of the product.
And on the way there, he ends up just getting caught up with him, with his best mate and an environmental sort of protester.
Yeah.
End up caught with this freak show and taken prisoner, where there's a group of freaks, like the Sock Man, which you just quickly mentioned something. The Sock Man, which is Bobcat Goldthwait, and doing a voice of... It's just a sock as a head of a human, isn't it?
Yeah.
Then you've got the cowboy, which is just a sort of human-like cow, which is probably my favourite of the freaks.
Yeah.
I think his voice just makes me laugh. The worm, there's the farting man, which is weird.
Yeah.
The bearded lady, which is just Mr. T in a dress. We'll touch on things you probably wouldn't do now, and that might be
perhaps,
The frog man, which is a bloke in a frog suit, as in the diving.
Diver,
which is really funny, I think.
Yeah, it's a good go.
And that's one of the... I think it's the co-writer, Tim Burns plays him, who is a musician as well, wrote some of the Clone Wars animated series.
Oh, yeah.
And more recently, the My Babysitter's a Vampire movie, which is quite new, I think. But I don't really know who he is, I just looked that up. And there's a dog boy.
Yes.
You knew who that was, yeah?
Yeah, it's Keanu, wasn't it?
Yeah, Keanu Reeves, uncredited.
Oh.
And I think he done that, one as a favour to Alex Winter, because Alex Winter co-wrote, co-directed, and stars in this. And I think if he'd begun to get bigger than Keanu Reeves, and if his name had been on it, I think that would have taken some of it away.
Yeah.
I don't think it's one of those, he took his name off it because he was ashamed of it.
No.
Because he actually seems to be really enjoying himself when he does in this. And so he gets caught up in this, or taken prisoner in this sort of freak show environment with... it's Randy Quaid is the villain.
Yeah.
Who Randy Quaid is very Randy Quaid in this. Whereas we'll go over the basic plot. We'll pretty much have. They get caught up, and we don't really want to. We will do spoilers, but you don't need to know much more, I don't think, if you haven't seen it. So yeah, should we discuss the cast actually?
Yeah.
Alex Winter's the leading man. What do you reckon?
Really good. Very good indeed. A slightly different tone and range to what he's doing in Bill and Ted. And he's great, and it sort of makes me sad that he didn't do more stuff, really, in that capacity. Yeah,
I mean, I don't want to say he's likeable, because the character isn't meant to be.
No, he's a smarmy, slippery git, really, isn't he?
But he carries the film really well. He's funny, and he's got one of those just expressions on his face alone. So for half the film, he is a freak, so you only see half of the face. But he has got that sort of arrogant, but not... He's
sort of charming, isn't he?
It's almost unaware that he's an arse.
Yeah,
that sort of look and acting wise, I think he's fine. I mean, I know when he done the latest Bill and Ted recently, he had acting lessons again. It'd been that long since he'd done anything.
You wouldn't know it with that, because I mean, in the new one, I thought he slipped back into the character.
More
convincingly than anyone else in the film, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably just him worrying about it, wanting to do it well, and considering how Keanu Reeves has gone on to be, well, back again. I mean, Keanu Reeves is a massive star, probably one of the biggest actors in the world, but he did have that bit of a dip, didn't he?
Yeah.
Sort of after The Matrix, and he's sort of more back now with the
John Wick.
Yeah, I know he said Jack Wick, which is not. But the other two sort of leads in it are, what do we say the guy's name? Michael
Stoyver,
the guy from Blossom, basically.
Yeah.
The one who wasn't Jerry Lawrence in Blossom, who's the sort of idiot best friend, really.
Yeah.
He's a sort of very, very 90s humour, sexless jokes kind of guy.
Yeah.
And the female lead in it is Megan Ward, who plays an activist, feminist. So there's the...
Wears a beret.
Yeah, there's the two going against each other, and they end up in the sort of freak machine thing, being attached together. So there's a lot of humour in that.
Yeah,
which some works, some doesn't. More works than doesn't. I suppose.
I think so. Yeah.
So that's kind of the three mains, and then the rest of the cast, apart from talk about Randy Quaid. I mean, he's one who's kind of, don't dwell on it too much, but his career's gone downhill to say the least. More for stuff in his personal life than on screen. But at this period, it was a year before Independence Day.
Yeah.
Obviously, Independence Day was 94, I believe.
Oh, right.
And he obviously been in the vacation films, loads of stuff, serious stuff as well as comedy. I think he's perfect for the role of this evil sideshow. Almost, what's the guy from... The Greatest Showman. He's like an evil version of him.
Oh yeah,
you know the one I mean. The Hugh Jackman character.
Yeah, whatever. It's P.T. Barnum.
That's the fella.
Yeah,
and he's probably sort of getting at that. Well, he's definitely getting at that sort of person. Really over the top. He's got a lot of good jokes in it. I mean, what did you think of his performance?
Yeah, I thought he was great. There were moments where he was a bit Shatnerian, I thought. I don't know if you thought that as well.
Hadn't really thought about that.
No.
There's moments of it reminds me almost of Robert Englund.
Yeah, I see that.
Bits of that with the wisecrack and then just that sort of evil smile. I mean, it's his name on the DVD cover, along with Alex Winters to sell the film, which, considering the cast in it, they haven't plastered over all these names.
No.
But at the beginning credits, it's got, obviously you said Keanu Reeves is uncredited, Bobcat Goldthwait's uncredited, but Morgan Fairchild's name's on it, and she's in one scene very briefly. They're quite a good cameo. Brooke Shields isn't in that much of it, sort of beginning and end, because the way the film works. But they're all pretty good, I think, and it's in a comedy like this, which is really stupid. It doesn't feel like anyone's just there as a favour for a paycheck. They do seem to be enjoying themselves.
Definitely.
Yeah. Mr. T's Mr. T. There's not really much else you can say.
Yeah.
But should we? I always do that. Do this a bit earlier, but things you wouldn't do in a film now. I'm not sure they'd do the bearded lady.
No, it's a bit played out. It's a bit kind of, I don't know, insensitive perhaps, or not as insensitive as I was expecting it to be. with the outset. But yeah, not a brilliant gag. Although Mr. T plays it to the best of his abilities.
Yeah,
it's nice to see.
It's just dated, I suppose.
Yeah.
That's it's the film's 29 years old.
Yeah.
So the joke was supposed to be you wouldn't think Mr. T's very feminine.
Yeah.
So that's why they've done it. It isn't intended to be transphobic or anything. No. But watching it now, it kind of is.
Yeah,
yeah. Not to say that if you watch it for what it is, there is a few laughs there with it. But, but it would have worked better in a sketch opposed to dragged out over a film.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah. But back then, especially.
Yeah.
But Mr. T's fine. Even when he has to do a bit of emotion, he's quite good.
He's not bad.
But considering that's only sort of 6 years after the A-Team, he seems a lot older and bigger. And he hasn't really done that much since this.
No.
So I'm not saying it destroyed his career, but it was definitely on his way down. He's mainly TV actors, isn't it? When you look at it. With, no, Brooke Shields had done the Blue Lagoon and stuff like that, but she was gone more TV.
Yeah.
It's a lot of names, but there's not that huge star apart from Keanu Reeves, which he's clearly there for his mate, isn't he?
Yeah.
But the gags, what do you think to the humour in it? Because you had a few really big laughs.
I was impressed by it, really. It reminded me a bit of when Woody Allen was funny.
Sort of Bananas type?
Yeah, kind of pre-Annie Hall, sort of Love and Death, and was it Everything You Wanted to Know About Sex?
Yeah.
Too Afraid, is that what it's called? Too Afraid to Ask? Yeah. It's a lot of it reminded me of those, and I mean that in a good way.
Yeah.
Just sort of slightly absurd stuff. I can't really fault the comedy for it, to be honest.
Yeah. There's a lot of jokes in it. I mean, it's a film. It got really, really mixed reviews. But there's one review I did see in Entertainment Weekly. They said it had more laughs in this movie than a month's worth of SNL.
Well, yeah.
Back in '93, I don't know.
That was a sort of good era for SNL as well, wasn't it? To be fair, but still probably true. It's non-stop. It's great.
And then most of the gags do hit home.
Yeah.
There's obviously bits of it of dated. I don't even know if you'd actually do a film around freaks anymore.
No, it does raise the question, doesn't it?
But I kind of see it as almost a spoof updating of the 30s film freaks.
Yeah.
You know, was it James Wilde? No, it wasn't James Wilde. It was the director of Dracula. Do you know the film I mean?
No, I don't.
It's well worth checking out. A classic. It's one of those. It's still a 15 by today's standards.
Wow. But
black and white, kind of horror. Really worth watching. A lot of it, like the Pinhead character, is straight out of that.
Oh right.
Pretty sure it is. It's been a long time since I've seen that film, but it's sort of almost a spoof of that.
Oh, cool.
So it's from films of that era. I'll just say, what wouldn't you do? I think there's a few things, but I don't come away from this. I didn't find anything particularly sexist, racist, that sort of.
No,
it almost has a go at the best friend character is that sort of obnoxious character, but he's meant to be an arsehole.
Yeah, he's not sort of idolised.
Yeah, whereas in films from possibly 10 years before that, in the sort of frat house films,
and 5 or 10 years after as well, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, American Pie. And that sort of well, yeah, it's very true. So with that, I mean, it's sort of good intentions, I think.
Yeah,
but. Some of it, there is a lot of, I don't know if you say cruel, nasty humour in it, like with the little kid who's a big fan of him, who they call the troll. I mean, it's funny, but they are just horrible to him.
Yeah.
But then at the end, it all comes. But he falls out of one gag I really love. He gets sucked out of a plane, which a wheelchair, an old man in a wheelchair does as well. Then the stewardess just closes the door with ease.
Quite calmly,
yeah, which is great. But then, what makes me laugh is you see a big stack of hay on the floor, and then he just falls and misses it. It's really obvious slapstick humour, but it really works.
It's really well done.
But it's very cartoon-like as well. Like this kid gets it's a friend of mine's son watched Home Alone 2 and counted how many times the burglars would have died, right? And which I think is great, and it packs a lot. But you could do that in this with this kid.
Definitely.
So yeah, and there's some good running gags as well, like with the laughing man who you hear on the other end of the phone who just only laughs. But yeah, I mean, some of it is a bit nasty, but at the end of the day, it's not a kids' film, is it?
No,
it's not. And it's almost that gross out humour.
Yeah.
Which around that time, it's around the same time as Dumb and Dumber, that sort of thing. There's a massive vomit gag at one point, which is done a lot in these sort of films, but done quite well, I think.
Yeah, because often I don't think that sort of thing's particularly funny, but
No.
I liked it in this.
Yeah,
it was so ludicrous that.
Yeah, but it wasn't. I mean, have you seen Guest House Paradiso, the bottom film?
No.
I mean, that's okay for what it is, but there's a massive. I mean, it just goes on too long.
Yeah.
So, it's like that. If you stretch a joke out, it's funny, but if you go too long, it's not funny, and it's timing.
Doing that, you have to go so long again that it becomes funny again.
Yeah, yeah. It's we have to speak to Stephen McFarlane about this sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, I think it works. I think most of the humour does, and just I mean, some of it is pretty gross, but because it's like a cartoon, and the beginning credits, which I did want to mention, is almost like old MTV styling. A bit. We mentioned it was like Peter Gabriel, Sledgehammer video, but to use the 90s term, but on acid.
Yeah.
A lot of sort of stop motiony stuff in it. So it just doesn't feel like we're in the real world when you watch this film. But yeah, it's very 90s MTV is the way I look at it. And then the two, who did he direct it with? Tom Stern, who I hadn't heard of, but he's co-wrote American Werewolf in Paris, what came out a few years later. Kind of bombed, yeah. But he's been directing Toys That Made Us, the Netflix thing. So he's still working, still doing stuff.
That's a fun show.
Yeah, it's all right. It's watchable. They were on a TV show called The Idiot Box in the 90s, for a short-lived MTV thing.
Oh, right.
So I think that's where we get that sort of styling from.
Yeah.
But how do you, as someone younger, how do you think that stuff looks and feels?
Yeah, I mean, it looks kind of dated, but I think that sort of stuff's beginning to sort of become in vogue again, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think we're moving slightly past the 80s nostalgia obsession into a sort of idealised 90s, perhaps.
Yeah.
And so I think that sort of stuff is maybe coming around again, and it could help something like this become slightly better known, maybe.
Yeah.
It's. I mean, I'd quite like that sort of thing, but it is slightly alien, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of from this very short period of almost early to mid 90s. You wouldn't have got the same sort of thing in 99. So when by the time the Matrix had come out and special effects,
a whole different kind of.
Yeah. But while we're on the 90s theme, we mentioned that the one of the leads is Megan Ward, who I was thinking, where do I know her from? And it's California Man, or Encino Man as it's called in America. She's in that, Joe's Apartment, which was an MTV film, and then the 90s TV series Dark Skies, which is kind of like an X-Files, but
I've heard of that.
Set in the 60s or 50s, I believe.
Yeah.
So she was in a lot, and I think at the time she was a big name to be in this. Possibly just before she got big. It's one of those. She was famous for a few years, like the actress in Super Mario Brothers, who I always forget the name of. Samantha Mathis or something like that, isn't it? Manford. Do you know what I mean? She was big for in a few films, which unfortunately I think is the Hollywood system. They like a younger star,
and
then part of the machine, but she's fine in it.
Keanu Reeves is still here.
Yeah, Keanu Reeves
years later.
Yeah, but he's had his ups and downs.
He has.
So I think she's really good, and because it's her, it's got that. If you know who she is, it makes it that 90s thing.
Yeah,
which is cool. I'd say she wasn't amazing in it, but she couldn't fault her. If that makes sense. Then did she stand out? I don't know. I think she was all right.
Yeah, it's hard to stand out in a film that insane.
Yeah. But one thing I do think stands out is the makeup effects.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. With when Alex Winter's character's turned into a freak, it does look really great.
Yeah.
If it was done now, it would be CGI.
Yeah, and it would look kind of boring.
It would look rubbish, I think.
Yeah.
Some of it kind of looked like the character with the big nose who we didn't mention.
Yes.
That you can tell that's just sort of rubber over the top. But
yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah, but that's kind of why it works, isn't it?
I like that they all hate him.
yeah, for no reason, no reason at all. So that works. 12 million budget it had, which for back then, 12 million now for a film like this is nothing.
Yeah,
I think it wasn't huge then.
No,
I don't think, but it only made. I told you this before. 29,000 at the box office. It was only shown in literally a handful of cinemas in America. The distributors just thought it was too weird and pulled it. I think they were like, let's make money to... don't know how much money it made to rent on video.
Yeah.
It was only released in Australia and in Japan, which, not to, stereotype, but I think they'd probably get the madder humour more.
Yeah.
Especially, I like the Australian sense of humour, and it's kind of nasty.
Yeah.
which I could see working there. But
yeah,
then
definitely.
I'm assuming that box office takings is only from the American.
I hope so.
Yeah,
but
I don't know though.
Difficult to say.
So fairly low budget. The makeup I thought was great. The effects in general though, some of it was like kind of weird. But I think it looks good.
Yeah, I think there was a golden period. I think somewhere around that time, that kind of sort of mid-90s, where I don't know the balance between modern technology and just relying on sort of old-fashioned practical effects. It worked well, and you got that in your massive blockbusters, but also in things like this. And it's I don't know. I wonder if since then we've innovated to the point where it's not as good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think CGI is used more now simply because it's quicker and cheaper.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's as good.
No.
CGI is great for little touches, but this just looked great. It just looks. Some of it looked like that. Do you remember the TV show Trapdoor?
Yeah.
Some of it's very that. It's kind of like it's clay type, but it just looks cool. And I think that's the word. Even though this film probably would have got some. Looking back, it looks like it got average reviews, but I bet some people hated it when it came out.
Yeah.
Because it is weird, but it's not so weird that it's not like David Lynch weird.
No,
it's got a narrative. It's got jokes. I mean, if this film was the same plot and wasn't funny, it would be dire.
Yeah, but then some people would probably love it. It's so boundary pushing.
Yeah, you're right, but they would be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's one of those that if it was just distributed better, or possibly, even though he's great in it and got it made, if it wasn't Alex Winter but a bigger star, I think it would really work. But
who would you have had as a bigger star?
Well, at the time, it would have probably been someone like Paulie Shaw, and would probably not have done as well. But who knows? I mean, 93.
Who could you have had? Yeah.
That is a few years later. You could have had your David Spades or someone like that. And I think he'd actually done that whatever film where he played a child star. Grown Ups. That kind of reminded me of that. But because of the humour in it, and it was 2 years after Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, the fans have got that little bit older. I think that's the reason a lot of people did like this when it came out.
I mean, it's quite similar to Bogus Journey. You can see where it's clearly some of the bits from that are kind of a leaping off point.
Well, the eyeball characters is two eyeballs that basically sort of henchmen, aren't they? So reminds me of Station from
and
Bogus Journey.
when the little kid turns into the big creature, spoilers.
Yeah.
That was quite Station, I thought, as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of the shots and things, I mean...
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if Alex Winter was kind of learning behind the camera on...
I bet he was. Well,
I mean, I know he did study film prior to that, but...
Yeah. Well, I think he always wanted to be a filmmaker. Yeah. That's what he's doing now. I mean, just because this film didn't do well, just off the back of Bill and Ted and the Lost Boys, I think if he wanted to be an actor, he would have been.
Yeah.
It was that... he had a few smaller roles before, and I think he wanted to get into filmmaking. Unfortunately for him, this was his, I think, at least movie directorial debut, and it didn't do what it wanted to. But it's one of those, I can't see why. When you look at when it came out, who's in it, the fact that it is funny, it's just bizarre to me that this. Well, most of the films on this podcast to me is bizarre, but to you, does it seem weird it flopped?
Yeah. I mean, I can sort of see why, but you could also imagine people just going on about it endlessly and how brilliant it is. It is quite peculiar, really, because it's great.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have been in school, high school, imagine this kind. It was one of those like, have you seen this film? It's mental, and it was one that it was talked about in the playground film. Also, I mean, it's a 15 certificate. I don't know. I imagine in America that'd have been PG-13. I don't know though.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's not aimed at kids, but it's certainly a sort of film kids would enjoy.
Yeah.
But I'd say that about RoboCop.
Well, yeah.
Which is very true with RoboCop.
Yeah.
So I think it's one of those. If it had been a 12 certificate and got the cinema release that it deserved, I think it could have been not a massive hit, but one of those sort of, as big as Ace Ventura or something like that. It was fair big hit.
Better than Ace Ventura, isn't it?
Well, it's aged better.
Yeah.
I mean, because I remember the first time I watched Ace Ventura, I laughed a lot. I don't think I would if I watched it now.
No.
I like Jim Carrey. I think I've always liked Jim Carrey, but it's not a great film. And talking of transphobic, the end scene on that is very dated, So there's nothing like that in this.
No.
And this is, it's not really remembered, but I don't know when I'll put this podcast out, but Alex Winter's coming, or as we record this, he's in the country doing a film at the Prince Charles cinema. I think the main reason is to promote his Zappa documentary, but they're showing loads of his films, and he's there for Q&A and stuff, and this is one of the films they're showing, which I don't know, but thinking about it, that could be the first time that's been shown on a cinema screen in this country.
Yeah.
Which would be cool. That's the one we're not going to now.
Sadly,
the way things have worked out, but at least we watched it now.
Yeah.
So I think little things like that, it could end up becoming a proper cult. He's kind of getting there in America, especially. If he goes on to make bigger documentaries or makes more films, this could be one that might get one of those Arrow releases or something like that and find an audience.
I've seen worse films on Arrow releases.
Arrow, they're very hit and miss with the films they release, but there's always a quality package.
Oh, yeah.
If it's cheap, I'll buy one no matter what, just to watch. I love it. You get the actors slagging the films off. Which is, because they do the documentaries years after the film, and they don't care anymore.
No.
They're paid to talk about it. They're not paid to promote it.
No.
And there's the difference. And that's what I love about nowadays with special features on Blu-rays, DVDs. Because if they're done in retrospect, and I mentioned California Man. I planned on doing a podcast with Adam, who's been on some.
Yeah.
He really liked the film Monkey Bone, Brendan Fraser growing up. I'd never seen it, and he'd never seen California Man. So we're going to do two Brendan Fraser ones. This was before Brendan Fraser sort of had his comeback. Beginning of lockdown, we watched them both, and I watched Monkey Bone. I quite liked it, to be honest. It was all right. But the commentary on it by the director, who is Henry, the guy who directed Night Before Christmas.
Oh,
it wasn't
that
Tim
guy.
Burton, yeah. He directed it, and he's so nice on the commentary talking about it. And I'm like, I know, I've looked it up, and he fell out with Chris Columbus, lots of people with very bad, shaky to say the least production. But because the commentary was recorded just before the DVD came out, he's sort of doesn't slag anybody off as far. Whereas not too long ago, I listened to the commentary on Batman and Robin by Joel Schumacher, which was done years after release.
Yeah.
And he's like, I didn't want to do that. That was to sell action figures. And it ends before the end of the film, which is the only commentary I've ever had to do that. It's brilliant.
Wow.
Better than the film, but what isn't? It's funny, Batman and Robin, but it's not very good, is it?
No.
That's
why Superman works alone. Is that from that one?
Yeah, isn't it? Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. The only reference to Superman in that era. But yeah, I mean, going back to this.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, I like to go off and talk about it. Yeah, it was sort of conceived as a film for the band, the Butthole Surfers, originally,
right.
and went through a lot of different. I don't know who came up with the idea or whatever, but it went through a lot of different things. I noticed they had written some original music for it. But what did you think of the music in it? Because that's something I thought was really 90s.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I thought it was cool. Quite 90s-y. similar to some of the Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey energy again.
Yeah. Very guitar based.
Yeah. But not like the sort of 80s widdly stuff, like Get In, Excellent Adventure.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I thought it was great. Adds to the overall charm of it all, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah. Just thinking though, you said that, something I sort of picked up on myself. Bogus Journey, I'm going to quickly look up when it was made, but to me, they weren't that many years apart. But Bogus Journey to me feels really 90s.
Yeah.
And Excellent Adventure
about
feels
as 80s as you can get.
Yeah, and that's really. But I do think.
But
Bogus
Excellent Adventure sat on the shelf for a couple of years.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, definitely. But if Bogus Journey was made, 91, it was released, so it would have been made 90. So
yeah.
But a lot of films from that era, like Pump Up the Volume, for example, feel really 80s. So I think that's nice with the Bill and Ted films, especially with the new one though.
Yeah.
To me, they're all in different decades.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. But this is. If you look at Alex Winter's career, you've got the definitive 80s film, as in The Lost Boys, which is actually more of that than you think. He just doesn't say a lot.
Yeah.
But he's good in that, as perfect for that performance. And then you've got the 90s with this, and then a more modern take on things. Because the new Bill and Ted, even the soundtrack, it's not what I thought. It is very 2020s, really.
Yeah, perhaps, dare I say it, disappointingly so, but that's...
Yeah, I still like it.
Oh, no,
I think
wonderful film. It really made me very happy, but not enough mega shred.
Yeah.
It sounded all a little bit too Coldplay for my liking.
Yeah, but I do think that was deliberate.
Maybe it was necessary,
inevitable.
Yeah,
I mean, it wasn't as cheesy nostalgia as, say, the Ghostbusters, I thought.
No.
But which I did enjoy as well, but probably not as much.
Storyline as well.
So, I suppose this is one we could probably keep quite short. Anything else you want to add on?
I don't think I do. Did you do your ratings?
I was going to say, do we do it out of 5 normally, don't we?
I'd leave that up to you.
I usually do it. I mean,
you're the Vault of Cult Master.
I think as should I do mine first then? Shall I? Because I picked it. Because when it came out, I'd have given it a 4 out of 5.
Yeah.
And I'd have watched it. I reckon I was 13, 14 when I watched this, and being of that age and the sort of childish, juvenile, slapsticky, bad taste humour in this, I'd give it 4 out of 5. Being a 40-year-old man, I'd still give it 4 out of 5. The nostalgia worked for me because it aged in a different way to a lot of stuff in the 90s and felt more 90s to me. It flowed really well. It was an 80-minute film what felt short. That is short, but some 80-minute films, especially comedies, can drag.
Yeah.
So for me it's a solid 4 still.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Solid 4.
You going for it?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Not just because you did.
No, because
I'm capable of my own independent thought.
Yeah.
But I came to the exact same conclusion as you. So.
Okay. So is it what you expected?
I don't know what I expected, to be honest. I don't think anyone could expect that.
Okay.
And that's a massive credit to the film.
There we go. While we're here and while we're talking about this, I might record a bit afterwards. I don't know what I'm going to do with this. Whether I'm going to stick it out as a podcast on its own, put it with another film, probably put it out on its own because we've made over half an hour. But I sometimes talk about newer films afterwards on my own that I've seen. We did both see the Nan movie, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
The Catherine Tate man.
Yeah. That's going to go down in the cult, isn't it? And that's one for the history books.
Yeah. Didn't like it. Do you want to say anything about it?
Did you not?
No.
I'd say a disappointment, but it's sort of exactly what I thought it was going to be.
I ended up more disappointed than I thought because I knew it would be bad. That's why we went to see it, to be honest. Wasn't it? But to start with, I thought, okay, it isn't too bad, and it had moments. It was like there could have been a good film there.
Yeah,
and then
the talent involved in it.
Yeah, and I'm not saying there wasn't a few laughs in it because there was, but not enough for 90 minutes.
No.
But then it just gets a bit wrong. I mean, it felt dated, and it came out this year. It was more dated than this film.
Yeah, definitely. What was it? Peter Bradshaw who said that it was sadder than anything you'd see in a Bergman film. That was pretty wonderful.
But that's, I mean, I've never really liked or watched really properly her sketch show when it was on. But Catherine Tate's someone I just thought was better than this.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah, so we just thought we'd give it a mention.
Yeah.
But anything else you've seen lately that you think could go on to be a cult classic?
Anything else I've seen lately? No. It's just the Godfather and the Godfather Part 2. I think you'd really like them.
Yes.
You don't hear much about them, but they're very good.
They've all been reissued, haven't they? They're all in
Yeah.
cinema, so. But you haven't seen anything else new that you...
No, not really. I'm terribly dull.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, no, because we saw that Phantom of the Open, which was pretty much...
Oh, yeah, that was a nice film.
Yeah, nice British...
And then The Duke, which is the same film.
Yeah, but not quite as good.
But not quite as good.
But probably make 10 times as much money.
Quite possibly, yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, I think that's all we can say at the minute. But a big thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank
you.
you.
Do you want to plug your band and stuff?
Nah, that's alright.
Go on.
The Puka G Players. Check us out on the internet.
Word.
That's P with 2 O's.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Massive thanks, guys. I enjoyed rewatching both of those movies, and I enjoyed chatting about them. Hope you enjoyed listening too. Both guys seem to like it, and we'll be back for future episodes. I planned on being about midway through season 2 now, but so many films are coming to me, hence I'm now doing on occasion more than one per episode, so I might just season it off every 10 episodes but just keep going and not have a break. I'm enjoying it. But I do want to talk about other films as well as the ones we just review. One thing I might be doing, I've been watching a lot of the sort of copycat B-movie films made by Asylum, so I might start talking about one of them very briefly in each episode as well, just to mix things up. I do want to mention a movie I rewatched recently that I don't think is becoming a bit of a cult classic, but there might be some re-interest because the franchise is being rebooted. It's the early 2000s Dungeons and Dragons movie, which I saw in the cinema when it came out. I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, or D&D as it's known. Want to, and I think I'm going to start to. That's why I rewatched this movie, and when I saw it in the cinema I didn't think much of it. It totally bombed. It got terrible reviews, but watching it these years later in retrospect, and not going into it hoping it'll be like the 80s cartoon, which I think I did, I quite enjoyed it. Jeremy Irons is really good as an over-the-top kind of camp villain. There's a bit too much CGI, but the humour works. One of the Wayans brothers is in it, I forget which one. He's quite amusing. Richard O'Brien pops up with some nods to the Crystal Maze, and Tom Baker, the old Doctor Who, Tom or Colin Baker, I don't know, one of the Doctor Who's is in it as well. A few little in-jokes. Picked it up, second-hand copy from CX for £1, and it was well worth that. So if you want something a bit light-hearted, it's got dragons in it, and I thought it was quite cool. So I recommend that, I suppose. And also I watched a movie that proper bombed from a couple of years ago called The Iron Mask. Strange one, this, another sort of CGI heavy. It's all over the place, dubbed from Russian, I believe. The main star is Jason Fleming. Very loosely based on The Man in the Iron Mask, the novel, because there's a bloke in an iron mask in it. It's sold as an Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jackie Chan movie. They are both in it. They're both quite good in it, but they're not in much of it. It's bonkers. I don't know if I liked it or not, which makes it kind of interesting, I suppose. If you're a fan of Arnie, he's quite amusing. Jackie Chan, he's Jackie Chan it, but not used to his potential, really. But give it a go. I mean, this was another one picked up. I didn't, but someone picked it up for about £3 on Blu-ray from a big chain shop. So worth a go if you want a fun 2 hours that you're not that fussed about. Gonna recommend the Nicolas Cage film what's out at the moment, where he plays himself, and I am really debating doing a Nicolas Cage special with some of the ones I liked when I was younger. Gonna have a think, because a lot of people are doing that at the moment. I did plan and made notes and got someone to watch some Brendan Fraser films probably about a year ago, and then he sort of had his comeback, and a few people have been doing that, so that episode never happened. So I think I'm going to do this one. I think I'm going to do it. There we go, I've said it. Anyway, thanks a lot for listening. Thanks a lot to my 2 guests who will be back very soon, hopefully. And don't forget to comment on the Facebook, the Instagram, get in contact, spread the word, really. Be nice to chat movies. Any films you recommend for me? Usually we go for sort of 80s, 90s, which is what I grew up watching. There might have been some I missed, and be nice to see, give it a fresh look and sort of role reverse what we do on this podcast. Thank you very much, and keep watching the trashy films, really. Cheers.